Hey everyone, it's MK. Welcome back to MK Quilts and MK Quilts University for this edition of What's Up with MK. So, welcome to my home studio. That's where I'm working today, and I just pulled a little table runner off of the frame. So this table runner is obviously a little twister project, and it is from a class, a piecing class that I taught at the shop not too long ago. Now, I was quilting it here in my home studio on McFinity, and there was just a couple of things that I did differently while setting this up. I took some video of the quilt, I did some screen capture, and I wanted to share a couple of things with you. So, I'm sitting on my laptop recording this for you. I'm going to try to recreate a couple of scenarios that I was doing. I'll weave in some recording from the actual machine and some footage of the quilt being stitched. But basically, let me set the scenario. I wanted to use this hexie edge to edge. I believe it is called diagonal plaid hexies. It's from Urban Elements. But when I went onto my folder that I normally keep on my machine, I wasn't finding a version of this that I had preset. So if you know anything about the way that we stitch edge to edge designs in my studio, you know that I set them up ahead of time. I get them sized, all of that. I repeat them, I connect them. I get all of that work done ahead of time so that I don't have to do that work once I get to the quilt. Well, in this particular case, I did not have the design already preset. I had the original design that I bought from Urban Elements, but that's all I had. I didn't have anything preset. So I wanted to stop and show you this. First of all, so you can see the steps that I did, but second of all, to let you know that yes, many times, most times actually, I'm setting up whatever I'm going to stitch away from the machine. I'm using my simulation product to do that. But in this case, I needed to set it up, and since I had the quilt loaded, I just went ahead and set it up at the quilt. So I'm going to clear my screen. I'm going to get a little bit of a line drawing set up for you just so that you have a visual, and then let me walk through the steps that I did to get this accomplished right at the machine. All right. Yes, indeed. I have moved to my office here at MK Quilts. But what you're looking at on the screen is a recreation of the project that I had as it was originally loaded. Now, this is a small-ish table runner. It's about 17 inches by 52 inches total. Now, I stitch on an infinity, so the whole entire thing fit on my frame in my throat space, right? The same would be true if you were stitching on a Forte or an Amara 24. If you were stitching on anything shorter throat space wise than an Amara 24 or Forte, then you're probably not going to want to fully connect what I'm about to show you. You might just want to leave it stitching from left to right and then left to right and then left to right because you're going to have to advance. Now, of course, having said that, there is a way on a shorter machine to just set this all up as one big design and connect it, as long as you know how to stop in the middle of that big connected design and advance in the middle. Okay, if you're not quite there yet, we'll save that for another day. Now, this little table runner does have a couple of borders. We're not doing any of that on this stitch out. And I can see that my little inside of my table runner, my line drawing rather, is a little bit not aligned properly. So let's just take a minute and align that baseline, file save. I'm going to save the workspace just so that I have a good version of that workspace. Okay, but basically what you are pretending with me now is that I was standing at the machine and I'm looking down at this table runner that's loaded. It completely fits in my throat space. We had already determined that I did not have this design set up, connected, repeated, anything like I normally do. So the very first thing that I did, just a basic, came over to the left-hand side, did an area two corner, grabbed my machine, went down to the other side, a little bit out into the batting and two corner. I went ahead and opened up my design just as I had received it from Urban Elements. Now, I basically knew that I wanted to severely undersize this design. Okay, comes in at 15 inches tall, that little point to point design. Clearly, I'm not going to want to stitch it that big on this small scale project, but I didn't really know how tight I ultimately would want it. So basically, you guys, what I did just to begin was I took a little bit of an educated guess on the size of the design. I just resized it while I was standing there. I did a repeat, made sure I was on horizontal, did fill, made sure I was on point to point. I zoomed in a little bit if I needed to, and then I started to close up that vertical gap distance. Okay, so nothing real earth-shattering right now. Basically, that's how we set up an edge to edge in many situations, right? Once I kind of let fill do its work, I took over and I added a few more horizontally, and then I went ahead and I added a few more vertically. Then what I started to do was some air stitching so that I could really see on my project where was a 5-inch design with the gap distance closed, where was that really going to hit, and was that as tight as I wanted it to be. Now, I'm going to mention something pointed out. I don't use it very often, but if it makes sense in your brain, you should absolutely use it. It's this 1-to-1 aspect ratio button. Now, if we click on our help button, and then we click on this little 1-to-1, it tells you what it does. Okay, use this button to zoom closer as a way to see the design 100% of its size. Okay, wonderful. My brain doesn't equate it that way. If yours does, and I've ran into plenty of students in my in-person classes that use that 1-to-1 aspect button. To me, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't equate in my brain, doesn't talk to it to my eyeballs and the like. So what I do a lot of times is just a little bit of air stitching. Now, I want you to keep in mind, I have not baselined. I basically just brought my machine into the middle of the quilt, Pro Stitcher, new start and end, start auto on, start auto off, and I just did Pro Stitcher quilt with the stitch button turned off. Hit run, and I just stood there at my machine and I watched that trace through the design. Now, it's not an actual trace, nothing is being stitched. The machine is just moving. I'm watching my laser light and I'm making some determinations about the size and density. Okay, it wasn't tight enough at 5 inches. Okay, pause, cancel. I did modify resize. Now, I did modify resize after I had already done some repeating. That's fine. I just went ahead and undersized it some more. Now, if I resized it to the point where it wasn't filling my area box anymore, remember, I have not baselined. So back to repeat, I just did a few more horizontally, a few more vertically, whatever it took. No baseline, back into the middle of my quilt, Pro Stitcher, new start and end, start auto on, start auto off, Pro Stitcher quilt with the stitch button turned off. And you guys, I did that several times until I really thought, you know what? This is tight enough. Now, I like tight quilting generally. Also, again, this was a very small scale project. So I really wanted it to be tight. Okay. I'm just going to take a minute off camera and I'm going to get this resized to the size that I actually stitched it. And you know what? I've decided to just bring you along and let you watch me do this. Right now, I have not baselined. I have 8 vertical repeats. If I take this down to 1 repeat, I can now see how big it was. You guys, I resized this design until 1 row was 2.99. Okay, that's pretty small, but that's okay. That's what it took. That was my personal preference. Okay, now if I was truly doing this at the quilt, hint, I didn't. I just kept that big version of the repeats on the screen and I kept resizing it down until it was the size that I wanted. I'm just showing you how I'm accomplishing, kind of backing my way into the size that I landed on, just so that you can see how I work with simulation. Okay, so I know when everything was said and done at my machine, one row was 2.9. Okay, so I'm just going to go back now to repeat, make sure I'm in horizontal. I'm going to hit fill one more time. I'm going to add more horizontal repeats and I'm going to add more vertical repeats. Now, one of the really cool things about doing what I just showed you is that the gap distance remained. Okay, so I took it all the way back to only one row, but Pro Stitcher still remembered that I had repeated it and I had changed the gap distance. So that's kind of a nice little trick. You can bank that information maybe for a future time when you are setting up an edge to edge. But basically, this is what I had ended up with. Now, I am going to go up under view and turn my jumps on. Lots of times when I'm teaching you guys, I turn the jumps off just so that it's not mucking up the screen so much. But now I can see I've got all of these jumps. Everything is stitching from left to right, and it's outside of my area box. So the first thing is I've oversized it. I don't need to stitch all of that. And the second thing is I don't want to have all those stops and starts. I want this to stitch as one design, one start point and one stop point. I want it to stitch from left to right, then right to left, then left to right, then right to left, and so on and so forth until I have one design. Okay, remember, it fits in my throat space. So I don't want to have to address the machine every time it gets to the right-hand side. No. I'm going to jump now over onto Designer and I'm going to show you real quickly those steps of connecting a digital edge to edge the MK way. I'm cutting the free portion of the video here. If you want the full lesson of this What's Up with MK, please jump on over to MK Quilts University, become a member. You can always cancel at any time. There's a 1-week free trial and a $5 off coupon off your first 6 months of membership. All right, you guys, here we go. I'm going to jump on over to Designer.